Welcome to the Ask Brian podcast radio show, where you'll hear from some of the most successful founders and CEOs of businesses and startups, sharing their best advice for success and even some stories on how their mistakes actually make them even more successful. Now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tracy.
Hello, welcome, and you may be so surprised all of a sudden to be like, wait, where's Brian? This is Tracy DeFord. You're listening to 98.1 FM, AM 1220 KHTS, and this is the Ask Brian show. And how do we spell Brian?
B-R-I-E-N.
Yes, thanks, Patty. Woo!
Of course.
So Brian told me before the show, so he's going to be arriving. Speaking of flying solo, he's flying solo into Los Angeles. He's quite not solo by himself. We don't want to give that indication. Traffic copters everywhere would be like, what? But no, he'll be joining us when his flight lands. He gets his bags and can get here as soon as possible. But until then, it's just you and me, Patty, and our fabulous guest.
Yes, indeed.
So for those of you who are new to the Ask Brian show and don't even know who Brian is, but you do know that it's not usually spelled B-R-I-E-N, we want to showcase why we think the E is so important in AskBrian.com. So, Patty, the number one reason the E is important is because of the...
There are a number of words that have to do with Ask Brian, Tracy. That's almost like our theme. Remember?
It is kind of our theme.
Yeah.
But I think the number one reason, the number one E is always the engineer. Because you have to start with the engineer. If you don't have an engineer, you don't have a show, right?
Yeah, that's what I've been saying. You know, Tracy, you need to host this more than he does. You give me way more credit than he does. I like this.
Don't tell him that. I have this like really weird intuitive feeling he's somehow listening, and this is all just set up. So,
he probably is,
and probably lacks empathy for both of us right now. What do you think about that?
I believe he does, and that's another word, empathy, because we're all very empathetic, even if
we are, and so even though Brian isn't empathetic, but that's okay. We can't really. We really shouldn't talk about him too badly while he's away, because he will be back and he'll probably listen to the podcast version of this and be like, "What?"
He has a weird way of being empathetic. He has a weird way, but it works. It counts.
It's a wonderful way. So we've got expertise, we've got entrepreneurship, we have got enthusiasm. We are never lacking enthusiasm
or excitement.
Or excitement. And what else am I missing here? Enthusiasm, excitement, entrepreneurship, experts. Our guest, we have a great expert guest.
Yes,
that's for sure.
Indeed. Well, there is also experience, because everybody is very experienced in their field, and effort, because we all give 110% effort in what we do here.
And we do give 110% effort, and especially bringing you the show, which we love talking about our stories with our experts and their entrepreneurship journeys and everything that they do to make the world excellent.
Hey, there we go. That was the last one, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, let's bring in our guest.
Yes.
I'm so excited about this guest that I had to get cut off talking to him before we could actually bring him on the show. So I can't wait to continue the conversation that we were having. Nick Lynch, co-founder and CEO of Collidescope.io. Welcome to the Ask Brian show.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for having me.
Well, we are so glad you're here. You know, speaking of putting excellence out into the world, I am so in love with the topic that we're going to be talking about today, which is social media activation, fundraising, measurement platforms, but all with the putting good into the world and working with brands and solutions. And you have an amazing story that brought you to this place, and we want to hear all about what is Collidescope.io and what was your journey getting you to this place?
Yeah, sure. So, just to kind of set the table, my background from a professional standpoint, I've been in marketing and advertising and the digital space for a better part of 15 years here based in Los Angeles, pretty much building solutions and technology for brands and advertisers and agencies to better target their audience on digital and social media. But from a personal standpoint, I'm a cancer survivor. I'm a Make-A-Wish kid. They sent me to Disneyland when I was sick, and I've been a part of their amazing family ever since then, as well as just supporting various nonprofits throughout my entire professional and personal career. And what I've seen on the marketing side, I've been sort of fortunate to have a front row seat into where sort of these two worlds are colliding, where brands and their marketing teams are looking at social impact, corporate social responsibility, and looking to be more aligned with causes and nonprofits. I mean, COVID really put a huge spotlight on the fact that social impact marketing and investments from brands, is extremely important in driving not only brand perception, but really bottom line. And the corporate marketing teams really want to spend more dollars with these partners and these causes and align them closer with the nonprofits. But, nowadays in terms of digital marketing, everything is measurable. But from a nonprofit perspective, there's a lot of challenges and a lot of resource restraints in terms of being able to actually execute and provide real good reporting for brands to potentially, invest more dollars and partner with them. And so these brands are really requiring better transparency and reporting, and that's really where Collidescope comes in. So we've built a social media analytics and measurement platform that allows brands, global causes, and social media influencers to better collaborate and measure their cumulative influence and impact. So think of us sort of like the Tinder or the Match.com for brands, nonprofits, and social media influencers. We find those types of matches and allow them to collaborate, and then we partner and promote those collaborations on social media for campaigns, and then we measure the efficacy of those partnerships and provide reporting back to the brand to let them know how powerful their integrations were with the nonprofits and how well it boosted their brand, as well as how well it provided positive impact downstream for the cause or the nonprofit that they're working with. So we're trying to essentially align incentives all around and make sure that everybody is working together in the most productive and collaborative and positive way to make the most impact they can.
And I think it's so important. One of the things that's been happening over the last 20-plus years is really this aspirational goal of brands to be aligned with nonprofit organizations' cause, like you said, and even more so recently in terms of social impact and social consciousness. But there hasn't really been a way to, as the brand or the agency for the brand, to track an ROI on that. It's always been a nice, warm and fuzzy, a nice thing to want to have as part of your messaging and your marketing strategy. But what I'm hearing you say is that this is really providing an opportunity to take those partnerships, take those alliances, and really be able to integrate them in a marketing strategy with tangible ROI results. Is that how you would describe it?
You just nailed it. You can be the CEO now. That was perfect. That was exactly the way that we looked at the opportunity, is that there's just so much goodwill that's being, built up from a brand perspective. And to your point, there's been focus and alignment for the last 20 years in trying, for brands to really be more aligned with nonprofits. But now, with the availability of data being so prevalent and the way that it's utilized to activate marketing campaigns, there's really just an expectation from these boards from a public company perspective, as well as just many stakeholders even at private companies, to where they want a little bit more transparency and a little bit more insight into how those dollars are being spent. And there's just a tremendous roadblock because at the nonprofit side, and they'll tell you this, I mean, they're fantastic people doing amazing things, but they're so focused on the mission when it comes to administrative work and paperwork, it's just not their forte. And they really don't have the resources or the expertise to do it. So, we're really focused on building a platform that really builds that bridge between the two key stakeholders so that they can communicate the same way, that they can measure things the same way, and everything is as efficient and as effective as possible, given now, technology is so far advanced, since, the beginning of corporate social responsibility and nonprofit alignment.
No question, and I think, ultimately I would imagine that the end game on this, too, is that it will create longer-term, more sustainable relationships between the brand and the nonprofit so that it becomes a partnership at that point, and it's not just an ad campaign, but a real, true relationship because it's a win-win, but then you can also take that to the bottom line on the P&L and the CMO's projections and things like that so that they can really continue this relationship in a way that's viable for both parties.
Yeah, 100%. So there's absolutely the incentive and the goal to create broader partnerships because, you can really only do, effective things when you really are able to measure them, right? And so when we've measured campaigns in the past, not only have we been able to drive real insight into, scalable opportunities for the brand, but also cost optimization for the nonprofits, right? So when you're becoming a more effective and efficient nonprofit in terms of utilization of marketing dollars to drive donations, you immediately want to do more with the partnerships that you're seeing the data come from. So exactly, you nailed it. The opportunity really is to build partnerships up front, measure those partnerships, and figure out where you can scale them in the future.
Do you find that when the brands are making the decisions to align with these partnerships, do you find that they come from a personal passion point, like you were saying before that you are a cancer survivor, and that ultimately was a big part of your journey that led you to create and co-found and run this company? When you're talking to CMOs and CEOs who are making the decisions, are they coming at it from a personal place of like they had a family member that might have had Alzheimer's or lung cancer, or they are really passionate about endangered species? Is it a top-down, or is it more about we have a product line, let's say Patagonia, for example, is a really great outdoor company. Let's work with a Boys and Girls Club and encourage people to go outdoors. Like, how are they making the decisions to align with these nonprofits?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. It's top-down and bottom-up. So from a top-down, the most straightforward way to look at it is as a brand and as a product, where are our values and how do they align with potential nonprofit missions? And that's been sort of the driving force for the last, better part of 2 decades, right? But what we're also seeing is a humongous generational shift in terms of, really Gen Z really driving the focus on where brands should be focusing on, their corporate social responsibility initiatives, right? And it's really accelerating those conversations. And so you're seeing sort of from the bottom up this generational real leadership in terms of where their passions are aligned and where they believe, the company and themselves really want to focus on the causes. So we're seeing a really cool sort of merge of top down, bottom up, but really momentum forward for causes that are aligned both professionally from a business standpoint as well as personally.
Yeah, I do think, the purse power is also, I think what I'm hearing you say is the purse power is also indicating these level of partnerships, because it used to be a nice to have, and it's a need to have now, because people are going to be much more wise as to where they use their disposable income and spend their disposable income, and they're going to want to align with brands who are being more socially conscious and placing funds in other places, or at least allocating funds through revenue shares or percentage of profits or things like that, right?
Yeah, 100%. So not only is that happening, but also just the visibility of it. Before, corporate social responsibility was a footnote on a website or maybe a newsletter that was internally circulated. Even as much as like 3 or 5 years ago, corporate social responsibility was still more looked at as a recruitment tool, right? That hey, join a company that's doing good. But now, over the last couple of years, it's really accelerated to, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're doing it, and this is why we want our consumers and our customers to be a part of that value journey, and this is how we want to scale it, right? And they're becoming much more deliberate and much more communicative about what corporate social responsibility means to them as a brand and how they hope to scale it in community with their customers. And so that's really where the marketing teams are now coming in. They're integrating with corporate social responsibility. It's no longer part of an HR team. It's really more moved into a corporate brand team and really focusing on what that looks like. So we're seeing just a lot of migration happen internally in how they're organizing it and how they're executing it as well.
And I think it's always great to have that buy-in internally. And I know you have a lot of situations where people will have team walks, like for Relay for Life and fundraising. And my dad used to be super involved in the March of Dimes, Walk America. And so it's really nice to have that individual buy-in. But what I love about what you're doing and what Collidescope is doing is it's really taking that vagueness around a percentage of our profits go to, or, it always just felt like, yes, it was a nice marketing message, but it was also not a very transparent marketing message, because it was just, when you say a percentage of, it's like that could be defined in any way that feels good for the CFO, right? So I love what you're doing, because you're actually being able to show specific things. Like, I was reviewing a case study between the American Lung Association and Champions Unite, and these some really powerful figures of like $340,000 fundraise, 105 average individual donation. You're able to talk about 4 million plus social reach, and those are things that really make people trust and verify this whole alignment, and then that reiterates their willingness to want to work with that company as an employee or as a customer.
Yeah, 100%. I love that case study, not only just because it proves what we're doing, but how it really proves how well and how efficiently, if you measure things and if you can create some automation, you can get tons of corporate partner buy-in. You can manage those relationships in an effective way. And by using those partnerships, you can raise more money than what your goal was. Because for that campaign, their goal was $250,000. So they blew through the campaign goal because they were able to measure the effective tactics of the campaign and optimize to those tactics, which really drove up donations. But what's also really cool is, typically what you see in the nonprofit space is you expect to see anywhere from a 40 to 60% expense ratio, meaning that like whatever you're going to raise for your event, you're typically thinking you're going to spend almost half, right, to raise that amount.
Right.
Because we were able to measure what we were doing in a real transparent way from a tactical perspective, we were able to reduce budget and costs from areas where they typically would have spent money and focus it more into what was driving ROI. So their expense ratios were just drastically lower than what they expected and what they typically see. And so by being able to measuring all that, you're boosting donations, which is amazing. You're reducing costs, which is fantastic. And then at the end of this, you can provide really in-depth reporting back to your 54-plus corporate partners that say, hey, this is what we did, this is how we did it, and we can do it even better next time, and we'd love for you to be a part of it today, right? And so you can really create those, to your point at the beginning of this, long-lasting partnerships that you can scale because you can now create more trust and more transparency into the things you're doing.
Which also internally for the nonprofit then gives them the ability to take the foot off the gas a little bit in terms of their having to constantly, repeatedly fundraise, because if they can align with these corporate partnerships in a way with all of this great transparency and results, then they don't have to keep going back to the well, which I know is exhausting and also takes a lot of resources and human capacity to do that too. So before the break, we were just about to get into what I call your journey story, and you are a Make-A-Wish kid, and obviously your wish came true for a lot of people because you're still here, and you're doing great, and you're changing the world with Collidescope. But how did you go, because I know you have a really great background in solutions for brands and survivors, but how did you really, what was that moment when Collidescope became a vision for you and then a reality?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because I've been fortunate enough to be a recipient of a nonprofit and such an amazing organization like Make-A-Wish, one of the first things that I wanted to do when, it allowed me, when my time and my bandwidth allowed me to, was to really integrate myself with the LA chapter here. So about 6 or 7 years ago, I reached out to the CEO and I told him my story, and I kind of expected, an email from a secretary or something like that, within a week, maybe a couple of weeks. He called me like within 20 minutes of me sending the email, and we had this long conversation about my journey and how I could help. And so really from that day forward, I've been part of the advisory board for the Make-A-Wish organization here in Los Angeles. I helped them launch their Young Professionals Council. And so throughout my journey with them, this was sort of my first opportunity to kind of peek behind the curtain, really understand like operationally, how does a nonprofit work? How does this nonprofit work? What are the operational challenges of actually running a nonprofit? And, because coming from the outside in, all the time you may ask, like, oh, well, why can't you just do this? Or why can't you just do that? I mean, my background as a marketer, I had like a million questions about why they weren't doing certain things. And so, because I was able to sit on these boards and to see firsthand, all of the challenges that nonprofits face, not particularly just to them, but all nonprofits, it gave me a lot of clues around what could potentially be utilized or could be built in order to unlock all the opportunities for nonprofits. And so that hopefully gives you some context into that. And then, you fast forward to, March 2020, I'm on a plane back from Singapore. I think this is 2 weeks before everything shut down in the United States. And I was having conversations with my co-founder at the time about, what's going to happen when all of these nonprofits can't do in-person events, which essentially is where they get about 75% of their revenue generally. as a nonprofit. So what's going to happen when COVID shuts things down and nonprofits can't do in-person events? Like, what are they going to do? And that was really sort of the spark behind Collidescope is really thinking through, I now that I know operationally, what holds nonprofits back, seeing sort of, a couple steps ahead, what are the things that are they going to need, and then how can I create solutions to help bridge that gap, to help them really move forward, to help nonprofits become a little bit more digital savvy and more socially savvy than they are. And again, admittedly, they'll tell you that they're, a couple years, maybe even decades behind sometimes in terms of how they leverage marketing. And so that was really the genesis of all this, is really just trying to help nonprofits get through the challenge of COVID and how are they going to pivot. And, we look ahead, and a lot of the things that nonprofits have learned through this time, they're going to continue to do because they found really great success in it, more efficiency in it, less cost around it. And so, I'm very thankful and appreciative of my experiences before this that helped me put solutions together for the nonprofit space and for the corporate social responsibility space to really help everybody work together moving forward.
Well, and, there's been so much chaos and craziness in the world as a result of everything that everyone has gone through in the last 18 months or so. And what I'm hearing you say that I think is a really nice silver lining, and at any point in the day right now we're looking for a silver lining, and that is that you have really opened up this new world of digital nonprofit giving and engagement, if you will, in a way that supersedes and works around the live event model. But we're all hoping, and I know eventually we're going to get back to the live event model is never really going to go away because people are going to still want to go see live shows. They're still going to want to go to galas. They're still going to want to buy art at art auctions and all the things that really make robust nonprofit events. So what I think is a silver lining about this is that you now have this robust opportunity for them to build the bridge in between these live events, but also as a whole nother, maybe even broader revenue stream for them above and beyond just their one annual event or their quarterly events or things like that. So this is a sustainable thing for them to do fundraising going forward, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no reason why that, you can't start reactivating your galas and your auctions, but also do things like a campaign, let's say with Bloomingdale's, right? Their Bloomingdale's will do every quarter or so, they'll do sort of like their roundup campaigns for a charity of their choice. There's no reason why a charity, an influencer, and a brand like Bloomingdale's couldn't work together to do some online campaigns to push people towards something in person, right, or online, right? And so there's ways. Those are the big things that we're seeing is that we gotta make sure that all of these people who want to do good can find opportunities together, and then we can support those opportunities online. That's the big thing that we're building this platform for.
And so we're really talking a lot and focus a lot on the opportunities for the nonprofits to really optimize your platform and generate revenues and have really successful fundraising campaigns. Let's talk a little bit about your model with Collidescope.io. What is your business model and how do you monetize Collidescope?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that we're focused, we're a software as a service company, a SaaS company, and so we've built software that nonprofits and corporate brands can license. And so our software allows them to discover opportunities where there's alignment between the, again, nonprofits, corporate brands, and influencers, and then they can manage those communications and those campaigns and measurement all in one platform. So we'll charge, a monthly software fee to access and utilize our software, and then we also have opportunities to, activate things like donation collection as well as, a managed service. So there are a lot of brands and/or agencies as well as nonprofits who want to execute campaigns but may need some additional support or some additional resources, and so we can provide some managed services to help set up and execute and optimize the campaigns if they don't have the ability to. So those are sort of the three core models that we leverage, which is the software, the donation collection and processing, and the managed services.
That's amazing. So talk to us about your team. What kind of team did it take to build it, and where are you now with your team in terms of expansion?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been super fortunate. I have two co-founders. One of my co-founders I've worked with for the past almost 5 years in influencer marketing and social media marketing. And then my third co-founder, our technical co-founder, all three of us have actually worked together for a better part of 3.5 or 4 years actually building solutions for brands to better work with influencers. And so when this opportunity kind of came to us at the beginning of last year, we realized that we could repurpose a lot of the existing IP and the existing technology and really just sort of reskin it and retool it and refocus it a little bit to be focused more on the nonprofit space. So they've been great co-founders and with lots of experience, which has been awesome. And so, we have our technical team is actually based in Thailand, but our core sort of operational team is here in the United States. We have a small team here in the U.S., about 6 people, really focused on supporting our brands and our nonprofit partners and executing campaigns. And really where we're focused now is, from a scale perspective, is really reaching out to the top brands who are focused on executing CSR campaigns, as well as the various nonprofits, both in LA and California, and really across the country, to execute and build out the rest of the year and moving into 2022.
So that's a great question. I mean, that's a great point that I have a question around. So with your company, what I'm hearing you say is like you're working primarily maybe with events that are specifically in California right now, or are you really targeting because there's so many different layers of organizations, like there's the Make-A-Wish, for example. So they have like a national chapter. Do they have like an international, national, then regional, local, and then get down into the different cities? Sure. And so ultimately, do you want to take over the world of these organizations and then be like running campaigns on the local, regional, national, international level for independent organizations?
Sure. Yeah, no, so it's interesting. So our story actually, I should have probably included this. Our story started in Singapore. So as I was flying back and working through these ideas from my flight to Singapore, we have a lot of relationships with agencies, brands, influencers, the government in Singapore. The Singaporean government is very supportive of nonprofits, particularly around sustainability. And so we actually beta tested our solutions with, I think it was about 12.5 nonprofits in Singapore. We found those nonprofits. We worked together with influencers, and we built campaigns and found corporate partners, and really tested, battle tested our technology there, and helped those 12.5 nonprofits raise, I think, about $150,000 last year. So that was the beginning. And so once we were done sort of testing it in Singapore, we brought it back to the United States, and our go-to-market strategy was really around how do we leverage our existing network. So, Make-A-Wish, American Lung Association, and several other, nonprofits that we knew. We started to test there. And then the go-to-market really started to scale. And so we've actually, gone outside, of California and have focused on, broadly the United States, because to your point, there are so many different organizations everywhere. We're working mostly with national teams, and then we'll spill into their local chapters or their city chapters from there, which provides a humongous scale opportunity, because once you're a part of a national organization, most of these nonprofits with local chapters have anywhere from 40 to 200 different local chapters. So it's an opportunity to scale really nicely. And then we're also partnering with other large organizations from, either on the state level. So we're partnered with the Alliance of Nevada Nonprofits that supports all of the nonprofits in Nevada, which is several thousand. And, we're having other conversations with other partners that, support several thousand, and in some cases over 1 million nonprofits as well. So that's sort of the goal, is to slowly roll out at the national levels, and then kind of roll into the local levels, and then make larger strategic partnerships at maybe state levels, as well as global partnerships. One of the biggest markets that we're strategically eyeing is India. They are actually, by number, have the most amount of nonprofits in the world. They have about 2 million. The United States has about 1.5, but India has 2 million. So, we're, in terms of expansion internationally, really 2022, we have a keen eye on India in terms of, because their population is over 1 billion. They have 2 million nonprofits, and there's a lot of dollars going into there that need additional transparency and support with.
That's so amazing. And so I know that you are working and aligning with the brands. I know you're working and aligning with the nonprofits. How are you navigating media partnerships?
Yeah, so it's interesting. A lot of the early business that we've actually been referred, and almost all the business that we've actually been able to acquire has been referrals, but a lot of it is actually a lot of our media partners. We have a lot of PR relationships. We have a lot of other media relationships. And all the time, we're getting hit up or recommended by those partnerships. And so they're definitely a key partner for us, and we love to figure out how to make, synergistic opportunities around those types of relationships.
Because it feels like you have this really great network within the nonprofit organizations themselves, and then the brands, of course, have budgets to align with marketing campaigns for paid advertising. But it also feels like such a good fit for the media partners, the iHeart Radios of the world, and some of the other media outlets that could really take this image to a whole nother level, in which they could be marketing solutions as well as co-oping with the brands and with the nonprofit. It feels like just such a robust network of impact.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny that you bring that up. So one of the things, just to tease like some findings that we'll probably be releasing over the next 30 to 60 days, the big focus of what we do is really around transparency and analytics. And so we've been looking at the nonprofit digital spend over the last 2 years in terms of, how publishers are allocating sort of their unsold inventory and which nonprofits are getting access to that unsold inventory. I mean, there's trillions and trillions of ad impressions that are unsold on a monthly basis, right? And most of those unsold, ads are being filled with free nonprofit ads. And so it's been really interesting to look at what that is and how that's affecting nonprofits and who's actually getting that. So we're actually going to release some really interesting data around, who's the benefactor of those free impressions, and how can we better diversify and create more equitable opportunities for all nonprofits.
And I'm sure the media partners would be excited to have that happen as well. I think we have
100%.
Brian in the house in a really noisy way. Hi!
We definitely have them.
Yes, I am. And I'm not screaming yet, but I will be soon.
Not yet. I'm sure it will be. We've been waiting for it. Hi! Welcome. We've got Nick, and we've been having an amazing conversation about Collidescope and nonprofit brand partnership.
Well, I'm going to let you take most of the lead because I don't want to ask a question that has already been asked. So I'll be listening in. But I do have one question, and that is, do you have any competitors, and who are they?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. So, there's a lot of what I kind of call the legacy CSR space, which has been, really great at helping brands and corporate partners activate their employees to volunteer, to donate. And there's a lot of amazing, legacy software providers that do really great things in terms of donor management or some levels of email marketing. The guys like, Salesforce and Blackbaud, which are, mainstays in this space, definitely have bits and pieces of things that we're doing. But we're fortunate enough, we're an early mover in the social media and influencer space when it comes to corporate social responsibility and social impact. And so we believe that because we're early movers and we have the expertise, we can build enough fortification and scale to where the incumbents don't get too ahead of themselves and try to compete directly.
Okay. Well, what I wanted to know is whether or not, is this like a posting thing? Like, there's like 55,000 companies out there that have these posting software where you can post to 5 different places. There's a calendar and all that stuff. Is that what you do, or is it something different? I know it's with nonprofits.
Yeah, no. So I agree. We've built a solution. We built a nonprofit version of that, where you can essentially, it's like a Hootsuite or a Buffer competitor. But our core business is really around the matching of brands, nonprofits, and influencers who are synergistically aligned, where their visions are aligned and their values are aligned, and then supporting those campaigns on social media and then measuring those transparently. So, a good example is, we talked about American Lung Association earlier before. We identified partnerships, influencer partnerships that aligned with the American Lung Association and the event that they were doing, and we brought them in to do campaigns, and then we measured the efficacy of those campaigns. And so from those metrics and from those insights, we were able to identify which platforms worked best to raise awareness and to drive traffic and dollars. We knew which types of messaging and which types of imaging worked well. So as the campaign continued to roll out, we knew how to optimize and find better and larger partners and execute campaigns in that way. So we're really focused on the analytics and the insights around the campaign.
So, Nick, we've talked about all this positive impact, all the amazing things that your company is doing, and all of the results as a result of it. But there certainly has been a challenge. So in these next few minutes, what is the challenge that you faced? How did you overcome it? And what can we take away from that as entrepreneurs?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the biggest challenge that we faced as a technology company that is supporting the social impact space, and particularly working with nonprofits, is regardless of the fact that COVID moved nonprofits in a more digital direction, there's still massive amounts of two things. One is legacy think, right? We've always done this, or we've always done that, so why would we change at the nonprofit space? And so, legacy think is in any organization, but in particular the nonprofit space, is challenging to overcome. And the other is the sort of the apprehension of utilizing technology in the nonprofit space. And so really to focus on and try to overcome those, we really wanted to make sure that we were meeting people where they are, understanding where the limitations were, understanding where the knowledge gaps were, and try to create as much education, knowledge, and resources as possible. So we spent a good part of our early days talking to nonprofits. Honestly, I think I talked to over 300 nonprofit leaders about, what were they thinking through COVID? What were they thinking past COVID? What kind of technology were they using? Why didn't they use other types of technology? And really just listen to where they were in their process and in their journey as industry executives and leaders. And then from that understanding and knowledge, really focused on building resources and education. So we have a really robust resources page on our website that provides free playbooks for social media, that defines what social media is, that breaks down how to actually think about it and actually execute campaigns and social media organically. What is influencer marketing? What is TikTok, and why do you use TikTok? And what are some free resources around design, and how do you use Canva, right? And so really taking the big reoccurring elements in those conversations and building resources around it so that we can meet our key stakeholders and our key customers where they were, build that trust early so that once we actually went back to them with solutions that they would actually have to pay for, they would understand that we were coming from a place of meeting where they were, meeting them where they needed to be, and coming from a place of empathy, knowing that we know the challenges that they face. And so that was the big focus for us, and it still is going to be a reoccurring challenge because there are millions and millions. There's over 10 million nonprofits in the entire world, and so we're going to consistently be learning and speaking to them and hearing where their challenges are in the next round. But that's really how we overcame it is just listening, asking questions and listening, and then building resources around those knowledge gaps and making sure that we were providing value and trust up front so that when it came time to providing actual paid solutions, we already had trust developed and sort of had that well of trust already built up.
Yeah, that legacy thinking that'll kill you if you can't rise above it. So that's such an amazing point. How can people get in touch with you and learn more about and get engaged with your company?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check us out, Collidescope.io. That's Collide, Collide, Scope, Scope. Essentially, the worlds are colliding, and we have the scope to look to the future, and it's .io. And that's our website. You can look at all of our free resources if you're a nonprofit. We have amazing resources if you're a brand or run a CSR team that are looking for ways to get better insight and traction into your campaigns and your social impact marketing. And I'm Nick Lynch, and you can call me. I think our phone number is on the website. You have my email on the website as well. And I'm looking forward to working with everybody who's trying to make a positive impact.
Well, we're looking forward to having you come back on the show and tell us how you are changing the world in the nonprofit space with brands. We've been a great guest. We really appreciate it. Brian, have fun in Las Vegas, baby! Don't play too many slots.
I'm taking Ask Brian Radio and the podcast. I'm putting it on red. We'll see if we double it or out.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ask Brian Radio Show. You can listen to us every Thursday on KTHS AM 1220 and FM 98.1 or via Facebook Live or anytime wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit AskBrian.com to join the conversation and ask us your business questions, and we'll answer them on our next episode. That's AskBrien.com.